Kyoda, Namaste, Sat Shri Akal, Adab, Vanakkam, Kem Cho, hello and welcome. India Live's prime time session today, and uh, I will introduce our beautiful guest today, and would like to invite Laura Trask from ACT Party. We had off camera lots of discussion, and we thought, why not? We have a discussion online, and where all the viewers and listeners can understand their policies better and see what ACT wants to do or what is good for you to vote. But please welcome our beautiful guest for tonight, Laura Trask from Banks of Peninsula. Hello, Laura. How are you doing?
Hello, Harman. Thank you so much for having me on your show today.
Thank you for joining us. First of all, how's the weather? It's really freezing.
It feels like we had a false sense of safety last week when we had 25 degrees one day and now it's 7 degrees outside currently. So pretty cold.
It doesn't seem like spring is coming, but definitely elections are coming. So that's another hot topic
That is
to
a very
keep
hot
us
topic.
warm.
Definitely.
First, I will ask you, Laura, why ACT? What was the motive you joined ACT Party for being a candidate of Peninsula? There were other, you know, uh, another parties as well. But why did you choose ACT for your candidature?
Yeah, look, I think a couple of things. The main thing is ACT is the most sensible party out there. They're not offering you any kind of shiny looking promises that are going to cost us in the long run, but they're actually here to deliver real meaningful change. And the policies are quite common sense policies. And being a small business owner, I've seen so many different rules and regulations and how hard it is to actually operate as a business in New Zealand. So one of the main drivers for me to get involved with ACT was that being a business owner. But also I'm a mum. I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. So education is extremely important to me, and making sure that our children are well set up for the future and that they can compete on the world stage is also important. So ACT have fantastic policies around this. And yeah, I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about those soon.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, as you introduced, like there are lots of small businesses, which I can see your candidate list, ACT Party's list. They're more focused of, the people who are actually working daily basis and know what are the ground level, especially when we talk about crime rate currently in New Zealand. It's gone off the root. Uh, New Zealand once being known as most peaceful country, and if we see the newspapers or any headlines today, it doesn't, impress like that.
Yeah.
What will be ACT Party thoughts on crime rate to get control if you come in the power?
Yeah, look, Harman, you're so right. You don't have to look very far to see every single day I'm getting messages about youth crime or violent crime, especially on our small businesses. Our streets just don't feel safe anymore, and these youth seem to have little to no consequences. So ACT have an array of different things when it comes to what we will do when it comes to fighting youth. When we talk about youth crime, firstly, we want to make sure that we have some kind of consequences in place. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to have an initial infringement. So say you're picked up for a ram raid, for example. Actually, a ram raid is quite a serious crime. Maybe shoplifting. We'll go with shoplifting. We want to actually have some sort of initial consequence. So being able to actually, the police can issue some sort of infringement, like a fine, for example. If we have youth repeat offending, we want to see that these youth are monitored. So it may be having an ankle bracelet, for example, which will do two things. One, it will tell us where they are, especially in the evenings. But also it will act as a deterrent, because it might be a badge of honor to start with, but quite quickly their friends won't want to hang out with them if they know where the police know where they're located. And thirdly, we want to actually take youth justice away from a rangatamariki and separate the two. So we believe that a rangatamariki should be for the care and protection of children. And when we're dealing with children in the criminal system, we want to have that under the youth justice. So in doing that, that would actually allow a facility, a 200-bed facility, where we can house youth that are doing serious crimes. we're talking the ram raids, for example. And I don't know, you're from Christchurch, so I'm not sure if you remember last year there was a young man who went around beating up children on the way home from school. And it turned out he had over 80 offences and had been through 3 high schools. And he's still out on our streets today. So we need some serious consequences. But we also need to be able to rehabilitate these children and give them some kind of goals in life. So ACT have not only the toughest policy around youth crime, but we also have the best policies when it comes to rehabilitation and making sure that our kids actually have a fighting chance if they do unfortunately end up in one of these institutions.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree with that, Laura, because you told us a 1-year-old story, but I will just reflect a couple of weeks
Mm-hmm.
back, one Sunday, there were 10 crimes happened in Christchurch City, and
Yeah.
all of them were done by youth, and especially 7 kids were being arrested. I don't know what happened next,
Yeah.
because after getting arrested, it's like when earlier you used to do crime, you need to hide that crime, but now the youngster, the next generation, they think it's very cool thing, and they put it
Mm-hmm.
on social media and trying to advertise it.
Yep.
So how are we going to cope up with that if their mindset, because this is our next generation we are talking about, which gonna be one day adult, and gonna
Yeah.
bring more another generation to guide their way. But if the guidance is going on the wrong direction, um, how
It's
this is going to impact our New Zealand?
it's extremely scary. And one of our other candidates, Ben, we actually went and met some of those businesses last week. One was a Subway, the food store in Wigram. And what was interesting about that site when they went in there, you think it would be for robbery, but actually they just smashed in and then made a whole heap of damage. They didn't even there was a tip jar on the counter. They didn't even take that. So they were just going in there to cause a whole heap of mess, a whole heap of damage, and it wasn't even for money, for example. So you're right, there are youth that are going around and they're thinking that this is fun, but I think it's because they don't have any of those consequences in place, and clearly they're not getting that in the home life. So that's where we say it's time to actually intervene. And that's by getting these kids off the street first and foremost, because the police can only take them in for a night and then they can book them through the system, but they're back there the next night. So I'm hearing from police that are seeing the same kids night after night. So this needs to stop, and that's where we will make sure that we have somewhere safe for them to go, and where we can actually have that opportunity to teach them things and find a better way of life, but also make it not so fun and great that they want to go back there again once they're out. So I think it's just finding that balance between the two. And when it comes to the Adult Offenders Act, also has some really serious policy around adult offending, and in particular, which might affect your community a lot, is we actually want to add an aggravating factor into the sentencing when it comes to being attacked in your place of work. So if
Yeah.
you were to be attacked in your dairy or your liquor store, your retail environment, even if you were a bus driver or security, if you've been attacked within your place of work, we want that to be an aggravating factor so the judge can give you a tougher sentence, basically. And
Now,
yeah, so that's just one of the other things that we'll do for the adult offenders.
yeah. No, sorry, I'm interrupted. I've interrupted you, Laura. But as you mentioned, adult crime or any crime for the fact, we discussed about youth crime, but was one of your candidates we were talking about the other night, Ash Brahma from Hamilton East, and he mentioned himself.
Mm-hmm.
One guy did ram raid or robbery 3 times at his place, and the third time he got 76% off because of the cultural report. Um,
Yeah.
how is it justified? First of all, you're doing something wrong, you done crime, and then you actually getting discount on top of it. And surprisingly, he told us that there some cases they get 100% off as well. So how is it fair for the victim? Because for the victim, if they go for the battle for the defense, or the societal way, they first of all have to be present in the court. Another day gets away from their day-to-day routine, and they have to pay
Mm-hmm.
someone to look after their shop, or the shop will be closed for one day. And other things, insurance premiums, everything goes higher, higher, higher after all these things affects. So what will be the ACT party concern for the cultural reports, particularly, if I may ask, please?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, we think these cultural reports are an absolute travesty. They are getting people lighter sentences that are doing horrible crimes, and it's not fair on the victim. So we would actually remove cultural reports entirely from the sentencing. We don't think that a cultural report has a place. If you do the crime, you must do your time, and it's just unfair. As you said, Ash has had been robbed plenty of times, unfortunately, and he's talking to people out in the community, and you're continually getting re-victimized, and it doesn't feel like a justice system. It just feels like nobody cares about small business owners. And ACT, we say we have had enough of this, and we fully support you. So cultural reports would not be a mitigating factor in sentencing for us. They would go.
Cool. Now, when we talk about migrant society, I myself came here as a migrant student in 2012. There was easy way, I'll say, because being student, I explored the world and come to know whether I can stay in this country, and how beneficial I can be to the society and make my plan for the future.
Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden now, I know probably during the COVID we were shortage of labor, and we just introduced the new system, which is aggregation of migration of employees. But now, after the COVID left, and now we can see the policy has big loopholes. People are being misused or misusing. It's
Yeah.
both way. What will be plans for ACT to put a stop on people who are either exploiting the employee, or the employee who are misusing for the employers?
Yeah, look, ACT want to have a full review into this. We think that the process, and especially like the checklists that you need to do, are too difficult. So we're going to have a review of all of that. Also, when it comes to migrant visas, to help the incoming migrants, stop them being exploited when they get here, we want to make sure that they're not bonded to an employer if it turns out that's not suitable. But we need to have something in place that protects the employer as well. So we don't want people just to get in and be free to move on once they're into New Zealand. So the whole system, we think, has made immigration to New Zealand, or even, like you said, coming here on a student visa, extremely hard. And that's not the sort of place that we want to live in. We want to make New Zealand a not overly easy country to come into, but we want to be welcoming, and we need more immigrant workers, especially when we are talking about in our service stations, our food outlets, for example. We're absolutely crying out for staff. So it'll be one of ACT's definitely main motivations to look into the immigration policy, and we'll be doing a review on this when we're in government.
Because it also affects inflation as well, Laura. If I can connect, it's a simple economy classes and simple math. Everything gets on. $30 pay rate you have to show if you are hiring a labor from overseas, which it's not fair. First of all, if you are living in New Zealand, the minimum pay rate is very low. It's like very, very low. So you actually itself dividing country in two different categories. And having the same employee, it's going to increase the expenses of the business, and of course then they have to put more profit, and the things will get expensive. Nowadays, currently, even the minimum wage has gone high, we still struggle to afford a good meal, 3 meals in a day. What will be planned for ACT to control this crisis of the prices, which is going crazily high, especially for the food?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The first thing that you touched on was the different wage for migrant workers. So we think it's really unfair that there is a specified higher amount that is above the minimum wage, because, like you said, that is causing difficulty and arguments between people that like live in New Zealand or born in New Zealand and then potentially migrant workers coming in. And also it's expensive, especially when you're hiring someone for non-skilled work, then that just passes on to everybody else. So that is something that ACT would definitely look into. When it comes to the cost of living, this is, I would say, the number one issue that I'm seeing when I'm out and about talking to people. It is so expensive. I know myself, it is very expensive now, being in part of that middle class working group. And look, ACT, we've got quite a lot of policy around this, but firstly, we actually need to cut some of the government spending. We think it's not okay that we have a government in a cost of living crisis to be splashing out money on things that we just do not need. So, for example, things like Road to Zero, changing road names to Te Reo, failed cycleways. There was a website that they spent $100,000 on, then they decided they didn't like, so they just abandoned it. So to help get inflation down, ACT want to actually cut the wasteful spending. And when we do that, and we don't borrow extra money as a government, that will actually help bring inflation down, which will bring the cost of everything that you're purchasing down. It's not going to happen right away, and it will be a long-term work, but you will see some significant benefits pretty quick. And we also have a blown out bureaucracy. So this current government has spent so much extra money on hiring middle bureaucrats, but we're not actually seeing anything extra for our tax money. So they're actually spending 30% more, but I don't see 30% more doctors, nurses, police on the streets, for example. So cutting back some of that middle bureaucracy without any expense to the front line, that'll actually save the government a lot of money too, and that will bring the interest rates down and everything starts to fall back and becomes a lot cheaper. So that's just a couple of the ways that we plan on doing it, but we think it's something that government can control and that they should be doing right away.
Yeah, because to be honest, it's been a long time. I have stopped buying tomatoes, for example. That's like one veggie. It's too expensive. And now I found the substitute of, having tomato cans, which is probably not the healthy option, but that's what it is if I want to save money.
Yeah.
Now,
same here. I like there's, I'm putting things like dried apricots in the kids' lunches or something, overbuying them in the middle of summer, which, yeah, it's things like those little sacrifices in a country where we should be able to have plenty. And it's just too expensive. And look, and I feel we're working hard, we deserve to be able to afford things. And if we can get inflation down and we can cut the bureaucracy and government spending, then, we'll all be able to afford the things that we need. And that is something as a parent, and you yourself are a parent, is extremely important to us.
Yes. Now, when you touch base for the parents, Laura, the other part for migration community, or Indian Kiwi Indians, if I may say, we are very concerned about family values and bringing the family together, especially if I'll say after COVID. I personally felt I need to be staying with either with my parents, or my in-laws needs to be staying with me, so that we can support their old age things and all stuff, and the love of the family can be delivered to my daughter for the next generation. Now, I know the policy is being announced this week, and all three parties have major changes of being parents and grandparents category visa. If I may ask, what is difference between ACT policy than the other policies is?
Yeah, so it's great news for you guys that all parties are recognizing that it's super important to keep families connected. I know that I moved back to Christchurch so I could have a bit of a hand with my parents, and especially being a working mum. I feel for you, and I realize and we accept that you need your family nearby. So the difference is with ACTs, we've got the Unite visa. And part of that, so it's the same as the other parties, it would be a 5-year agreement. But we actually want to include an annual fee of $3,500, which goes towards the public health fund. And that could be adjusted in future years based on the healthcare costs for visa holders. But it's to ensure that you can actually access healthcare when coming to New Zealand. So the other parties are relying on you having private health insurance. And I can tell you now, it's so hard to get private health insurance when you're older. You have all these pre-existing conditions, and we feel that a lot of people just simply will not be able to come. They will not be able to get that insurance. So this is our way of saying, yes, you can come to New Zealand, but to ensure that you pay your way if you need any major surgery, for example, we're asking you to put a donation, well, not a donation, a fee, each year towards that. And we're not sure how much it will cost in the long term. So that's why we're saying that we will adjust that. And it will either go up or down depending on the need of those that are coming into the country. But we think it's a really fair and reasonable way of actually allowing family to come in here when they're not actually going to be taxpayers themselves.
Yes, because I think $3,500 will be yearly, but it will be reviewed
That's right.
year when we
Yeah,
have
it would be reviewed. Yeah, and look, that fee is basically been educated or on the premise of how much insurance may cost. But like we said, depending on if that fund is used or not, then we will be able to put the fund down. But if it turns out there are a lot of people coming here and they have a lot of needs and they're very unwell, then we may need to put that fee up. But we won't know until we get this process moving.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time, Laura. And any last message you would like to say to India Live viewers today? Stage is all yours.
Yeah, sure. Look, ACT aren't here to make you guys the shiny looking promises that are going to cost you in the long run, but we're here to actually deliver some real meaningful change. We all deserve to live in a place where crime is taken seriously, our money isn't wasted, and every child born here or coming to New Zealand, to call it home, has equal opportunities no matter where in New Zealand they live or what their ethnicity is. So I really hope you guys think about Party Voting Act in this election. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I will definitely tell to my viewers, like I say, each and every session, being neutral, I cannot say which color to choose. But
of course, yeah.
Go and do voting. That is the biggest power we hold. This is the democracy, and this is a power of, people do hear you if you make noise. And that's the biggest example this week. All three parties have announced the immigration parents, grandparents category visa policies because they heard you. So now you have the power. 3 years, you're going to choose what policies you want to implement in New Zealand. So please go and do voting. One should not be left behind. Well, thank you so much, Laura. I'll take a leave now. And thank you so much, viewers. We'll be in touch. And this was Laura Trask from Banks of Peninsula. और अगले एपिसोड ਲਈ ਵੇਟ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਆਪਾਂ हेमंत चौहान जी आएंगे 7 बजे खिचड़ी लेके पर उस तो पहला Trendy Talaiva is all set to come in on board 6 p.m. Silva Ganpati, looking forward for your information. Tat tak ji menu do ijazat. Rab rakha. Thank you so much.